The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Clarence's house, as Camilla, queen consort, walked slowly through the grand hallway. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, creating a rhythm that seemed to match her troubled heartbeat. It was barely 6 in the morning, and the palace staff wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. She had specifically chosen this time, knowing she would be completely alone. What Camilla didn't realize was that the palace's advanced security system was always watching. Hidden cameras, installed throughout the royal residences for protection, captured every movement within their silent lenses. These weren't ordinary security cameras that palace staff monitored casually. They were part of a sophisticated surveillance network that recorded everything, storing footage in secure digital archives that only the highest-ranking security officials could access. For months, Camilla had been carrying a heavy burden. The weight of royal expectations, the constant scrutiny from the media, and the challenge of stepping into Diana's shadow had created an overwhelming pressure that she struggled to manage privately. While she maintained her composed public image during official engagements and royal duties, the strain was becoming impossible to hide from those closest to her. On this particular morning, something inside her finally snapped. The previous evening had been especially difficult. She had attended a charity gala where whispers followed her every move. People compared her dress to ones Diana had worn, questioned her choice of jewelry, and analyzed every smile and gesture. The weight of these comparisons had followed her home, keeping her awake through the long, dark hours of the night. As she entered the blue drawing room, Camilla felt the familiar tightness in her chest that had become her constant companion. The room, decorated with priceless antiques and portraits of previous monarchs, suddenly felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the faces in the paintings appeared to judge her every move. Unknown to Camilla, Camera 7B in the corner of the room had automatically activated when motion sensors detected her presence. The high-definition lens focused on her face, capturing the raw emotion that she had hidden from the world for so long. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't disguise the exhaustion in her eyes or the tension in her shoulders. She moved to the large window that overlooked the perfectly manicured gardens. The early morning light filtered through the glass, creating patterns on the Persian carpet beneath her feet. For a moment, she simply stood there, breathing deeply and trying to gather the strength to face another day of royal obligations. But then something unexpected happened. Perhaps it was the isolation, the early hour, or simply the breaking point that every human reaches when carrying too much emotional weight. Camilla began to speak aloud, not realizing that every word was being captured and preserved by the palace's recording system. Her voice started as a whisper, barely audible even to the sensitive microphones hidden within the room's elaborate molding. She spoke about the loneliness of her position, how she missed her old life where she could make mistakes without international headlines. The words came slowly at first, like water beginning to flow from a long-blocked dam. She talked about the constant comparison to Diana, how every public appearance felt like a test she was destined to fail. The media's obsession with contrasting the two women had created an impossible standard that left her feeling inadequate and misunderstood. Even when she tried to honor Diana's memory and continue her charitable work, critics found fault in her approach. As minutes passed, Camilla's voice grew stronger and more emotional. The palace walls, which had witnessed centuries of royal secrets, now absorbed her most private thoughts. She spoke about the pressure from Charles, who wanted her to be perfect in a role that felt unnatural to her. She loved him deeply, but the weight of his expectations added another layer to her struggle. The security camera continued its silent recording, capturing not just her words but every facial expression, every gesture that revealed the depth of her emotional turmoil. Palace security systems were designed to protect against external threats, but they were also inadvertently documenting the most vulnerable moments of royal life. Camilla moved away from the window and sat heavily in an antique chair that had once belonged to Queen Victoria. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was seeking comfort in furniture that had supported another woman who had faced tremendous pressure in her royal role. She continued speaking, her voice now carrying the weight of months of suppressed feelings. She talked about the staff members who still spoke Diana's name with reverence while barely acknowledging her presence. She mentioned specific incidents where protocol officers had made subtle comparisons that cut deep into her confidence. The palace, which should have felt like home, often felt like a museum where she was merely a temporary exhibit. The morning light grew brighter as Camilla's monologue continued. She spoke about her fears for the future, wondering if she would ever be accepted by the British people. The polls and public opinion surveys were constantly measuring her approval ratings against impossible standards. Every mistake was magnified, while her successes were often overlooked or attributed to her royal position rather than personal effort. What made this moment particularly significant was its complete authenticity. Without an audience, without advisors coaching her responses, without the weight of royal protocol demanding careful word choices, Camilla was simply being human. The cameras captured a woman struggling with one of the most challenging roles in the world, revealing the person behind the crown and title. As she sat in that ornate room, surrounded by centuries of royal history, Camilla unknowingly created a historical document of her own. Her words, preserved in digital format, would eventually become some of the most candid insights ever recorded about the modern royal experience. The technology meant to protect her was instead documenting her most private moment of vulnerability. 3 days later, Senior Security Coordinator James Mitchell was conducting his routine review of the palace surveillance footage. It was a mundane task he performed weekly, scanning through hours of recorded material to ensure no security breaches had occurred. The palace's digital storage system contained thousands of hours of footage from cameras positioned throughout the royal residences, most of which showed nothing more interesting than empty corridors and routine staff activities. James had been working palace security for 15 years. He had seen everything from minor staff disputes to attempted security breaches, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered that Tuesday afternoon. As he fast-forwarded through the early morning footage from Clarence House, something made him stop and rewind the recording. The timestamp showed 6:13 a.m. on the morning in question. Camera 7B had captured clear footage of the Queen Consort entering the blue drawing room alone. James initially assumed this would be another brief, unremarkable clip of royal movement through the palace. However, as he watched Camilla's behavior and listened to the audio, he realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. Palace security protocols were strict about royal privacy. Staff members signed comprehensive confidentiality agreements, and surveillance footage was treated with the highest level of discretion. However, James found himself in an extraordinary situation that no training manual had covered. The audio quality was exceptional, capturing every word of Camilla's emotional outburst with crystal clarity. As James listened to the recording, his expression changed from routine boredom to genuine shock. The Queen Consort's words were not just personal complaints or minor frustrations. She was revealing deeply personal struggles that could potentially impact the monarchy's reputation if made public. Her candid discussion of internal palace dynamics, her relationship with Charles, and her feelings about Diana's legacy created a complicated situation for the security team. James immediately paused the recording and contacted his supervisor, Security Chief David Harrison. The conversation was brief but urgent. Within an hour, Harrison was reviewing the footage himself, trying to determine the appropriate course of action. Palace security had procedures for handling threats against the royal family, but no clear guidelines existed for managing a situation where a royal family member inadvertently created sensitive content. The two men watched the recording together in Harrison's secure office, both understanding the gravity of what they were witnessing. Camilla's words painted a picture of royal life that contradicted the carefully managed public image the monarchy worked hard to maintain. Her descriptions of internal conflicts, personal struggles, and feelings of inadequacy revealed a human side of royalty that the palace preferred to keep private. Harrison faced a difficult decision. Protocol required him to report significant security-related discoveries to the private secretary's office. But this situation fell into a gray area. The footage wasn't evidence of a security breach or external threat, but rather an unintentional glimpse into the most private thoughts of a senior royal family member. After careful consideration, Harrison decided to brief Sir Edward Fitzgerald, the Queen Consort's private secretary. The meeting took place in Fitzgerald's oak-paneled office, where palace business had been conducted for generations. Harrison explained the situation carefully, emphasizing the accidental nature of the discovery and the sensitivity of the content. Fitzgerald's reaction was immediate and intense. As one of the most experienced royal advisors, he understood the potential implications better than anyone. The footage could be devastating if it ever became public. Media outlets would analyze every word, creating headlines that could damage the monarchy's reputation and Camilla's already fragile public standing. The private secretary immediately implemented what palace staff referred to as a silent protocol. Access to the footage was restricted to only the 3 men who had already seen it. The digital file was moved to a secure server with enhanced encryption, and a formal classification was applied that would prevent routine access by other security personnel. Meanwhile, Fitzgerald grappled with whether to inform the Queen Consort about the recording's existence. On one hand, she had a right to know that her private moment had been captured. On the other hand, revealing the footage's existence might cause additional stress and embarrassment that could worsen her emotional state. During this same period, other palace staff began noticing subtle changes in the building's atmosphere. Word had somehow spread that something significant had occurred, though the exact details remained unclear. Palace employees were skilled at detecting tension among senior staff, and the unusual meetings and hushed conversations created an undercurrent of speculation. Lady Margaret Thompson, Camilla's lady-in-waiting, noticed that the Queen Consort seemed even more withdrawn than usual. During their daily briefings about upcoming engagements, Camilla appeared distracted and occasionally asked questions about palace security procedures that seemed oddly specific. Lady Margaret wondered if something had happened that she wasn't being told about. The situation became more complicated when King Charles returned from a diplomatic trip to Scotland. Protocol required regular security briefings for senior royals, and the question arose about whether to include information about the recorded incident. Fitzgerald found himself in the uncomfortable position of deciding whether to potentially embarrass the Queen Consort by revealing her private moment to her husband. Charles had his own challenges managing the transition to his role as king, and additional stress about his wife's emotional state could create further complications. However, keeping such significant information from the monarch also presented risks, particularly if the footage's existence was discovered through other channels. The palace's internal communication system, usually efficient and straightforward, became strained under the weight of this unusual secret. Staff members who were accustomed to clear protocols and established procedures found themselves navigating uncharted territory. The recorded conversation represented something entirely new in the modern era of royal surveillance and security. As days passed, the knowledge of the recording's existence created a ripple effect throughout the palace hierarchy. Each person who learned about it faced the same moral and professional dilemmas: how to protect the Queen Consort's dignity while maintaining their duty to the crown, and whether the footage represented a security concern or simply an unfortunate accident of modern technology. The weight of the secret began affecting those who carried it. James Mitchell found himself unable to perform his routine security reviews with the same detachment, knowing that the cameras he monitored could capture similarly private moments. Harrison struggled with the responsibility of safeguarding not just physical security, but also the emotional privacy of the royal family. In the secure server room deep beneath the palace, the digital file containing Camilla's most vulnerable moment waited like an unexploded bomb. The technology that had captured her words with such clarity was the same technology designed to protect her, creating an ironic situation that highlighted the complex relationship between privacy and security in the modern royal household. 2 weeks after the discovery, the careful balance of secrecy began to crumble in an unexpected way. Lady Margaret Thompson had been observing Camilla's increasingly erratic behavior during their daily meetings. The Queen Consort seemed anxious about seemingly routine matters, asking repeated questions about who had access to different areas of the palace and expressing concerns about privacy that seemed out of proportion to normal royal security awareness. During a particularly difficult morning, when Camilla had canceled 3 engagements due to what she described as feeling unwell, Lady Margaret made a decision that would change everything. She approached Sir Edward Fitzgerald with her concerns about the Queen Consort's mental state, suggesting that perhaps professional support might be beneficial. Fitzgerald found himself in an impossible position. He couldn't explain Camilla's behavior without revealing the existence of the recording, but he also couldn't ignore Lady Margaret's legitimate concerns about her employer's well-being. The conversation forced him to consider whether keeping the secret was actually protecting Camilla or causing her additional harm through isolation and uncertainty. That same afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at the palace. Dr. Sarah Chen, the royal family's private physician, had been summoned by King Charles, who had grown concerned about his wife's apparent decline in health and spirits. Charles had noticed that Camilla seemed to jump at unexpected sounds, avoided certain rooms in the palace, and had developed what appeared to be an intense fear of being alone in large spaces. Dr. Chen's examination of Camilla revealed symptoms consistent with anxiety and stress, but the Queen Consort was reluctant to discuss the specific causes of her distress. During their private consultation, Camilla made several references to feeling watched and mentioned concerns about privacy that seemed to go beyond normal royal security awareness. The physician's report to King Charles was carefully worded but clear in its implications. The Queen Consort was experiencing significant psychological distress that required immediate attention and potentially long-term therapeutic support. Dr. Chen recommended reducing Camilla's public engagements and creating a more supportive environment within the palace. This recommendation forced a crisis meeting between King Charles, Sir Edward Fitzgerald, and Security Chief Harrison. The 3 men gathered in the king's private study where centuries of royal portraits seemed to witness their difficult conversation. Charles demanded to know if there were any security concerns or incidents that might explain his wife's deteriorating condition. Harrison and Fitzgerald exchanged meaningful glances before Fitzgerald made the difficult decision to reveal the existence of the recording. The explanation was careful and diplomatic, emphasizing the accidental nature of the discovery and the steps taken to protect the footage's security. However, nothing could soften the impact of revealing that Camilla's most private thoughts had been captured and preserved. King Charles's reaction surprised everyone present. Rather than anger about the breach of privacy or concern about potential public relations disasters, his immediate response was profound sadness for his wife's suffering. The recording's existence explained behaviors and comments he had noticed but couldn't understand. Her reluctance to spend time alone, her increased anxiety about palace life, and her defensive responses to routine questions suddenly made sense. Charles insisted on reviewing the footage himself, despite Fitzgerald's gentle suggestions that it might be better to simply ensure its secure destruction. The king's determination to understand his wife's pain overcame protocol concerns. In the secure viewing room, Charles watched and listened to 47 minutes of his wife's emotional breakdown, experiencing her pain through the cold lens of palace security technology. The impact on Charles was immediate and transformative. He realized that his own expectations and the pressures of royal transition had contributed to Camilla's suffering. Her words about feeling inadequate, about missing her previous life, and about the constant comparisons to Diana revealed depths of struggle that she had hidden even from him. That evening, Charles approached Camilla in their private quarters with unprecedented gentleness. Without revealing his knowledge of the recording, he began a conversation about the pressures she was facing and his desire to create a more supportive environment. Camilla's response was a mixture of relief and continued anxiety as she struggled to express feelings she had been suppressing for months. The conversation lasted hours and marked a turning point in their relationship. Charles made immediate changes to Camilla's schedule, reducing public engagements and creating more private time for recovery. He also implemented new protocols for their household staff, emphasizing respect and support for the Queen Consort's adjustment to royal life. Meanwhile, the small group of palace staff who knew about the recording faced their own reckoning. A formal decision was made to permanently delete the footage after creating a brief written summary of its general contents for security records. The deletion ceremony took place in the presence of all involved parties, symbolically closing this unprecedented chapter in palace security history. James Mitchell, who had originally discovered the recording, requested a transfer to different duties within the palace security team. The weight of accidentally violating royal privacy had affected his ability to perform surveillance responsibilities with his previous detachment. His request was granted with full understanding and no impact on his career prospects. Sir Edward Fitzgerald initiated a comprehensive review of palace privacy protocols, working with technology experts to ensure that similar incidents could be prevented in the future. New procedures were established for handling sensitive footage, and additional privacy protections were implemented in areas where royal family members might reasonably expect complete solitude. The broader implications of the incident extended beyond immediate personnel changes. Palace advisors began discussions about the balance between security needs and privacy rights in an age of increasingly sophisticated surveillance technology. The royal household had always existed under intense scrutiny, but digital technology was creating new challenges that required careful navigation. For Camilla, the weeks following Charles's intervention brought gradual improvement. Without ever learning about the recording's existence, she began to benefit from the increased support and understanding that resulted from its discovery. Her public engagements resumed on a modified schedule that allowed more time for personal adjustment and private recovery. The palace staff who had been involved in managing the crisis developed a new appreciation for the human costs of royal life. The recorded conversation had revealed that even those born into privilege and power faced genuine struggles with identity, purpose, and belonging. This understanding influenced their professional approach to supporting the royal family in subtle but meaningful ways. Months later, when palace security systems were upgraded with new privacy protection features, the technicians installing the equipment were unaware of the specific incident that had prompted the changes. The only remaining evidence of that early morning breakdown was the positive transformation it had ultimately created in the royal household's approach to supporting its members' emotional well-being. The story of Camilla's recorded conversation became part of palace institutional memory, passed down among senior staff as a reminder of the importance of discretion, compassion, and the complex relationship between protection and privacy in modern royal service. Though the footage was destroyed, its impact on the monarchy's internal culture proved lasting and beneficial. In the end, what had begun as a moment of private despair captured by impersonal technology became a catalyst for greater understanding, improved support systems, and stronger personal relationships within the royal family. The cameras that had accidentally documented Camilla's vulnerability had inadvertently helped create the very support system she needed to heal and thrive in her challenging role.